We are live. Welcome to the Liz Wheeler Show. I'm your host, Liz Wheeler. Have we got a good show for you today? The Supreme Court of the United States of America has been asked to overturn gay marriage. I guess if we want to be specific here, we could say the Supreme Court has been asked to overturn its gay marriage ruling. What does this mean exactly? It was 10 years ago in 2015 that the Supreme Court issued a ruling stating that same-sex couples had to be allowed to marry in our country regardless of people's religious objections to it. 10 years later, is this about to end? Has this experiment failed? Was the legal fiction on which this ruling was based, is it time for it to be thrown to the curb? What are the implications of this? Actually, the implications are gay marriage has been codified by Congress. So gay marriage would still just about be the law of the land. However, did you know that gay marriage is actually, it's an uncomfortable topic. Even conservatives don't often like to talk about it. But did you know it's actually a litmus test of whether your favorite politician or your favorite conservative commentator actually knows what they're talking about? If they understand the reality of the political enemy we face, which you must do if you are to defeat that enemy, then you have to have a certain position on gay marriage. Otherwise, you don't really understand the enemy that we face. If you are okay with gay marriage being the law of the land as dictated by the Supreme Court, then you don't really know how to win the fight that we're fighting. Now, you might be saying, but Liz, doesn't President Trump support gay marriage? Well, verbally, yes, he has said he supports gay marriage. So doesn't this eliminate him in this little premise that you're presenting? Does he, as a politician, not know the political enemy that we face? Does he not know how to defeat them? Not so fast. Not so fast. I don't think Trump is as ideological about gay marriage as you might think that he is. President Trump has already proved to us that he knows what he's doing, regardless, on these first 6 months. Immigration, Doge, Maha, keeping boys out of girls' sports, keeping America out of foreign wars, leveraging our economy, yes, with tariffs, to make sure that the playing field for trade agreements with countries around the world are actually fair to us, that we are not being taken advantage of. President Trump knows what he's doing. He's fine. But gay marriage is a lot bigger of a deal than you might think it is. And we conservatives have an opportunity upcoming now with the Supreme Court facing this request to overturn their Obergefell ruling. And that is one of the things we're going to talk about today. Today's episode is sponsored by Relief Band. Listen, I was kicking myself this weekend when I did not wear my Relief Band on our road trip through the Tennessee mountains. Oh, I literally posted about this on Instagram. Those of you who follow me over there, I was so car sick. And when I get car sick, I get whiny. And I knew if I'd worn my Relief Band, it would have helped relieve that nausea because, man, I get just a little cranky. You can ask my husband. He was sitting next to me. Just how cranky I get when I'm feeling nauseous. Relief Band is the original anti-nausea wristband that quickly relieves and effectively prevents nausea and vomiting associated with morning sickness, anxiety, migraines, hangovers, morning sickness, chemotherapy, and so much more. Relief Band is, well, legitimately a band you wear on your wrist to give you relief from nausea. And you can change the intensity depending on how you're feeling. You can make it stronger or weaker. It is 100% drug-free, non-drowsy. It works quickly before or after symptoms starts, and it has 0 side effects. Plus, Relief Band's new Premier Plus model provides advanced nausea relief. It includes a digital clock, and it utilizes a smart skin sensing technology to preserve battery life. And by the way, Relief Band isn't just magic, it's science. Relief Band's technology was originally developed for hospitals before it was sold to consumers. Relief Band is FDA approved, it's clinically proven, and recommended by doctors nationwide. So if you want to cure your nausea problem fast, join the hundreds of thousands of people who are nausea-free with Relief Band. Right now, we've got an exclusive offer for you, just for Liz Wheeler Show listeners. If you go to reliefband.com and use promo code Liz, you will receive 20% off plus free shipping. So head to reliefband.com. That's RELIEFBAND.com and use our promo code Liz for 20% off plus free shipping. All right, it's good to see everybody. I see that everybody is logging on. Good to see everyone. I hope you're having a good start to your week today. Just waiting for everyone to join us on this live stream. It's fun to sit here together and unpack this and unpack what's going on in real time. Before we get into the gay marriage debate and why gay marriage, you may think it's uncomfortable. You may think you don't care what happens in someone else's bedroom. It's none of your business. We have to tolerate it. We can't impose our religious beliefs on somebody else. Okay, but just wait until you hear the argument that I'm going to make to you in a moment. Before we get to that, I want to tell you a story. Over the weekend, an MSNBC reporter called me. Actually, let me back up. An MSNBC reporter texted me and asked me, could they call me? And I responded and said, I said to her exactly what I say to any reporter or personality, any employee of a hostile mainstream media outlet. I said, well, why do you want to talk to me? And what is the tenor of the piece that you're writing going to be? And how do you plan to represent me? And are you going to characterize me fairly and quote me accurately? This is standard what I say to any mainstream media individual who reaches out to me, because I'm generally happy to talk to them because I do want our side represented, even in their fake news pieces. I just don't want to be lied about or misrepresented or misquoted. But if we can establish some boundaries, then I'm happy to participate. So she agreed to that, and I talked to her, and she was very nice, very, very friendly. And I appreciate, by the way, she actually did accurately quote me, and the context in which she quoted me was accurate. But I was struck when I was reading this piece a couple days later. I didn't get a chance to read it actually until this morning. I was reading the piece that she published in which she quoted me, and the premise of her piece was about the Epstein files. And she was questioning whether Tulsi Gabbard declassifying the Russiagate, the House Intel Committee's Russiagate report, the one written by Devin Nunes, we've talked about it a bunch in the course of the past couple of weeks, whether that's a distraction intended for Trump's base so that they'll stop talking about the Epstein files. And it's not a great premise. I don't agree with the premise. And she had told me what the premise of the piece was, and I told her I didn't agree with it. Like I said, however, I'm often willing to talk to hostile reporters if they agree to represent me fairly, because I want my viewpoint, your viewpoint. We want our viewpoint represented to the readers of MSNBC, for example. Maybe they've never actually heard why we think what we think. And so if I have an opportunity to reach additional audience, as long as I'm represented fairly, I'm often willing to do that. I didn't agree with the premise of this piece. I told her that it doesn't even matter. My giving her a quote is not even, it's not interpreted by anybody as an implicit endorsement of the piece. Again, that's neither here nor there. But there was a couple paragraphs, one portion of this article that was mind-blowing to me. And it was her comments about the Russiagate revelations and the documents that Tulsi Gabbard has declassified and released to the American people. And she spent about 3 paragraphs talking about how the Russiagate conspiracy has been widely debunked, she said. And I said, widely debunked? What are you talking about? Widely debunked. And she said, these allegations that President Trump has made about intelligence community officials coordinating behavior to actively subvert him and undermine him, making up lies and spreading those lies, Russia collusion lies, in order to try to unseat him. It led to an impeachment. It led to spy warrants being leveraged against innocent people in his orbit. I mean, this was awful. It tied him up in knots for the first 3 years of his first administration. And this MSNBC piece said this was entirely debunked. And I was like, debunked? What are you talking about? And she even used the phrase a nothing burger, that these documents that Tulsi Gabbard had released were a nothing burger. And I read on looking to see if she has any kind of argument for why she's making these claims. And her substantiation for why Russiagate is a nothing burger or why it's been debunked is because President Obama said so. Because President Obama called these allegations nonsense and said it was a distraction. And I thought to myself, this is wild to me that this woman, like I said, she was perfectly friendly to me. And she quoted me accurately and in the proper context. And I have no beef with her there. I appreciate that. And I'm happy to say so. But it's bananas to me that a mainstream media reporter would call the documents that were released by Tulsi Gabbard a nothing burger when we have proof in front of us that there were multiple versions of that intelligence community assessment that was created by Obama and Brennan and Comey and McCabe after that December 9th meeting in the White House, that secret meeting in the Situation Room, where they decided not to use the actual intelligence community's assessment of whether Putin meddled in the 2016 election, whether he favored Trump, whether he helped Trump. The actual intelligence community assessment said, no, he didn't. He didn't help Trump, and he didn't even necessarily favor Trump. We have no evidence of that. Because Obama and his friends didn't like that, they held the secret meeting and they manufactured a new story, and then they called it the intelligence community assessment, but it wasn't. It was just their own assessment. We know that there were multiple versions of that intelligence community assessment. One that was briefed to President Obama, one that was briefed privately to the intel committees, one that was given publicly to the people. And in the private version of that intelligence community assessment, I hate even calling it that, by the way, because it's not what it is. It's that manufactured narrative from Obama and his friends. But in that private version, it specifically cites the Steele dossier, the Christopher Steele dossier, the one that Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid for, as the underpinning of their assessment. So they use that as substantiation for saying, actually, yes, Putin did favor Trump and Putin did try to meddle in the election to favor Trump. So we have proof now, thanks to Tulsi Gabbard's document release. And follow along with me what I'm saying here, because this is why it's so bananas to me that this MSNBC article said that this was a nothing burger. We learned nothing. We now know, because of the documents that were released, the private intelligence community assessment that was given to President Obama cited the Steele dossier. But then you had John Brennan, the CIA director at the time, lying under oath to Congress, saying that the Steele dossier was not used. And now we have proof that he was lying, because we have the private intelligence community assessment that was given to Obama that specifically cites the Steele dossier. That's not a nothing burger. That is not, we learned nothing. That's not widely debunked. We also have a roster of who was at President Obama's secret December 9th meeting, at which they manufactured this intelligence community assessment. And we know for a fact, thanks to the documents that Tulsi released, that John Brennan, again, killed the publication of 2 reports that said that the intelligence community had no evidence of Putin helping Trump or even favoring Trump. We also have an email from George Soros people saying that Hillary Clinton personally approved the Russia plan to distract from her own email scandal. Is that a nothing burger? How can you dismiss this if you are committed to pursuing the truth, if you let the facts dictate you and not ideology? It actually left me with a thought in my mind. What kind of proof do you need if this is not enough proof for you? And I think the answer to that is going to be nothing is enough for them if they already have a preconceived notion, if they are not courageous enough to let the facts lead them to the truth. And this is the other thought I have. They are going to be so surprised when indictments happen. I spoke at a conference over the weekend in Tennessee, and a million people asked me the same question. It was actually the most common question that I asked, or that I was asked. A million people asked me this weekend, are we going to actually see indictments? And of course, people's skepticism, their hesitation, their curiosity about this is a little bit based on the fact that Attorney General Pam Bondi told us that she had the Epstein files on her desk, or she said she had the client list on her desk, and then she didn't. She told us that there were truckloads of documents from the SDNY, and then there weren't, or at least none that she was going to show us. And then she said, nothing to see here. He killed himself. There's no client list. There's no blackmail. You're not going to see any more files. Thank you and goodbye. So yeah, people are a little skeptical about whether they're going to see indictments or not. And that's why they ask me, do you think that we're actually going to see indictments? And so I want to be very clear with my answer here. Yes, I do. I do think we're going to see indictments, yes. Now, the question that may end up being more important is what charges are going to be used, what individuals are going to face which charges. But yes, I do think that we will see indictment. John Solomon was on the show last week, and he was detailing the grand jury process to us, the potential charges, deprivation of rights under the color of law. He said he'd be surprised if Brennan and Comey aren't at the top of that list. But we also had the vice president over the weekend talking to Maria Bartiromo on Fox News, and he was saying, the vice president of the United States was saying, we are going to see indictments. Take a look at this.
Meanwhile, we're still waiting for accountability on the whole Russia collusion made-up story.
Yes.
Now that DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, has released all of those classified documents, we're actually seeing who was behind all of this. Do you want to see indictments?
I absolutely want to see indictments, Maria. Look, of course, you've got to have the law follow the facts here. You don't just indict people to indict people. You indict people because they broke the law. But if you look at what Tulsi and Kash Patel have revealed in the last couple of weeks, I don't know how anybody can look at that and say that there wasn't aggressive violations of the law. What they basically did is they defrauded the American people in order to take Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points and turn them into intelligence by defrauding the American people, defrauding the intelligence agencies, lying about what the intel said. They would take something that supported a Hillary Clinton campaign talking point, and they would overemphasize it and exaggerate it. They took anything that actually contradicted that narrative and they buried it deep, and through that, they actually laundered Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points through the American intelligence services. That's a violation of the people's trust. That's a violation of what our intelligence services should be doing, and I absolutely think they broke the law, and you're going to see a lot of people get indicted for that. Here's the thing that should really bother the American people. What do you want our intelligence community to be doing? I want them to be catching bad guys. I want them to be making sure that terrorists aren't going to kill innocent American civilians. I don't want them laundering Hillary Clinton's campaign talking points into the American media and giving them this air of legitimacy. It is sick and it's disgusting. It hurt the intelligence community, it hurt the American people, and it hurt the first Trump administration. We've got to have consequences for it, or we're just going to see the same play repeated again and after again.
Yeah. Those words that Vice President Vance used are exactly right. It's sick and it's disgusting. And this is the quote from MSNBC, or from the reporter at MSNBC. It should be noted here that outside of right-wing media, no reputable news organization has found anything incriminating in any of these new documents. Mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And by the way, the individual who called Tulsi Gabbard's release, the documents, a nothing burger. The MSNBC reporter was quoting Kathy Young from the Bulwark, who called the release a nothing burger. But potato, you quote someone saying that it's essentially the same thing. No reputable news organization outside of right-wing media has found anything incriminating in any of these new documents. Just wait till these indictments. Just wait until they come up. Paul Sperry reports that after a long hiatus, Hillary Clinton is suddenly soliciting supporters for donations in a new email blast from her nonprofit called Onward Together. She formed it in 2017. And this request for money was paired with a long, sappy letter from Hillary. The email provides a New York-based P.O. box to send the money to, plus a link to Act Blue. Well, to me, and I'm no rocket scientist here, but the fact that Hillary Clinton is trying to fundraise tells me that she thinks she might need to spend some money on legal defense here pretty shortly. She thinks there's going to be indictments here. There is. I think there's going to be indictments. The question, of course, is who's going to be indicted, where are they going to be indicted, and what charges are they going to face? And that, of course, I don't have a crystal ball. There's no way there. That remains to be seen. But I will tell you, and this is not speculation, I know this for a fact, your voice makes a difference when you raise your voice and you demand justice, and you demand specifically you are very specific about what justice you're demanding. That includes what charges against which individuals. That is heard. That is heard. And this administration responds and has responded to our calls for justice in ways no other administration ever has. So keep raising your voice. Shout, demand justice. All right, let's talk about gay marriage. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been asked to overturn gay marriage. Just like abortion, the left tries to tell us that this is untouchable, that this cannot be overturned. I'm not so sure that they're correct about that. I'm not so sure. So what is happening here? Let's go back to 2022 for a moment. In 2022, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, which was the abomination, it was the ruling from the Supreme Court that codified, not legislatively, but judicially codified abortion as the law of the land. Clarence Thomas wrote a concurring opinion to the majority opinion overturning Roe v. Wade. And there was one sentence in particular that Justice Clarence Thomas penned, that gave the left apoplexy. They started freaking out. They started saying, first the right is coming for abortion, and then the right's coming for gay marriage. And this is the sentence that Justice Thomas penned. He said, and I quote, "In future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, because any substantive due process decision is demonstrably erroneous. We have a duty to correct the error established in those precedents." So first of all, what is substantive due process? Substantive due process, Clarence Thomas defined it as legal fiction. Substantive due process is this legal philosophy held by leftist jurists that reads rights into the Constitution where they are not enumerated. So, for example, abortion. Abortion is guaranteed nowhere to anyone in the Constitution. It is not an indirect right. It's not even referred to in the slightest possible way in any part of the United States Constitution. And that's obvious. The reason I called it an abomination is, of course, because it led to the death of unborn children, millions and millions and millions of unborn children, but also from a purely legal standpoint, the majority ruling on Roe v. Wade was terrible. I mean, even individuals who were pro-abortion but understood the law said that it's actually a badly written ruling. It doesn't rely on the Constitution or any law. It's just made up. It's just judicial activists on the bench. Funny story, a little bit of a tangent here. The justice that wrote the majority ruling in Roe v. Wade, his name was Harry Blackmun. He had a law clerk at the time, and the law clerk was pro-abortion. He later said, Harry Blackmun's law clerk later said, his pro-abortion law clerk later said that Roe v. Wade was absolutely terrible and didn't give any pretense of even being constitutional law. Again, that's someone on the side of abortion. So anyway, substantive due process. Roe v. Wade relied on substantive due process. When the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health in 2022, Clarence Thomas wrote this concurrent opinion with the majority. He also voted to overturn Roe, but he wanted to say his own thing. And he commented on the fact that Roe was based on substantive due process, this legal fiction where you read into the Constitution something that's not written there. And there are other pivotal legal cases that the Supreme Court has ruled on that they have also engaged in the use of this substantive due process. It's a phrase that sounds like it might have legitimacy because substantive due process sounds like a legalism, but it's not. It's just a way of judicial activists, ideologues who are on the bench to invent meaning to the Constitution where the Constitution had no such meaning. And Obergefell is also one of those cases. That's why Clarence Thomas mentioned it, because Obergefell, the majority opinion was written by Justice Kennedy, and Justice Kennedy relied on substantive due process. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this argument. So even if you disagree with me on this, hold tight, listen to this argument for a second, then tell me why you think I'm wrong. Even if you're pro-gay marriage, even if you are libertarian and you don't think we should be telling other people what to do, if you read the Constitution of the United States, start to finish, it's not that long, doesn't take that long, highly recommend that you do it if you haven't done it before. Is gay marriage ever referred to? No, it's never referred to. It's never referred to directly. It's never referred to indirectly. There's no inference of gay marriage. There's not. Even if you support gay marriage, you cannot contest the reality that the Constitution of the United States contains no such reference to gay marriage, directly or indirectly. So how exactly then did Justice Kennedy come to the conclusion that two men have a constitutional right to get married? Well, he engaged in substantive due process, this legalism that Clarence Thomas calls legal fiction. He read, quote unquote, rights into the Constitution where none are actually enumerated, because it says nowhere that two men have a right to marry. So when Clarence Thomas wrote this sentence at the beginning of his concurring opinion in Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health, this caused an uproar. The left says, oh my goodness, first they came for abortion, now they're coming from gay marriage. And people on the right were actually louder than people on the left. People on the right said, no, we're not coming for gay marriage. Please, we would never touch gay marriage. Even the so-called right-leaning justices on the Supreme Court made pains to say that the ruling in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, this overturning of substantive due process, does not apply to anything except abortion. It doesn't apply to any of these other cases. They were obviously preemptively trying to respond to Clarence Thomas throwing out this firecracker because they knew exactly what type of political response this would get. I, for one, loved it. I thought conservatives were such weak little cowards when they, and I don't care who that offends, when they tried to run away from this. I thought, yeah, Clarence Thomas, that's exactly right. Overturn was made up. Even if you think that the legislature of the United States should make gay marriage legal, which you're obviously wrong on that for multiple different reasons, that's different than the Supreme Court pretending there is a constitutional right to gay marriage in the Constitution when there's not. But Justice Kennedy, he said, marriage is a fundamental liberty tied to personal autonomy and dignity. It's protected against state interference. Dude, nowhere in the Constitution, nowhere. So why do I bring this up? What's going to happen when the Supreme Court revisits gay marriage? Because now that's what they've been asked to do. You'll remember Kim Davis, Kim Davis from Kentucky. We're going to bring this report up from Just the News. The Supreme Court could hear a case in the fall that might see it overturn the nationwide right to same-sex marriage after former Kentucky County Clerk Kim Davis asked the top bench to grant a writ of certiorari to her own case. Davis refused, as you remember, to issue a marriage license to a pair of men following the Obergefell versus Hodges case, citing her religious beliefs. She spent 6 days in prison, and a jury determined she should pay $100,000 for emotional damages. Her petition to the court explicitly condemned the 5-4 decision as egregiously wrong and demanded that the court reverse the decision. The court is not bound to hear Davis's case, though doing so could result in some form of reversal. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the likelihood of this. The likelihood of this is low. I would say the Supreme Court is not going to visit this because many of the same justices who took pains to make sure that you knew they didn't agree with Clarence Thomas, they're still sitting on the bench, right? So they have no appetite to overturn gay marriage. So first of all, it's probably not going to be heard by the Supreme Court. It should be, because Kim Davis had her religious freedom, her right to the free exercise of her religious beliefs, violated by the government. And she's one of the only Americans right now that has standing to challenge Obergefell because she was hurt by it. So they should hear it if they have the courage to do so. But what could this mean? Even if the Supreme Court overturns it, the United States Congress has passed a piece of legislation codifying gay marriage to a certain extent. It requires any state that doesn't allow same-sex marriage to recognize same-sex marriage as any valid marriage from any other state. So it's kind of effectively nationally forces gay marriage in all the states. That being said, let me tell you why this is a litmus test. Let me tell you why this case is so important. It's not important because I think that the Supreme Court is going to overturn gay marriage. I pray that they do, and I hope they do for a variety of reasons. But let me tell you why this is so important. Because we live in a reality right now, especially in the new media, where our industry is heavily saturated. There are a lot of people with a lot of opinions, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing in the sense that it's always great to have a million options on the market, right? I'm a big believer in the free market. I think it's great to have competition, to see who floats and who sinks and who's good at what they do. I believe in meritocracy. At the same time, we have among conservatives a problem with following the wrong people. We have a problem with liking one thing that one person says and then thinking that everything else that they do or say is correct. And instead of thinking critically for ourselves, we just follow what they do. And I'm not trying to be hypothetical here. I'm not trying to be vague here. I am specifically talking about the right-wing individuals who want to lead you into secularism, who want to lead you into libertarianism, who want to lead you into this false idea of neutrality. They tell you we also don't want religious views forced on anybody. We just want a neutral playing field where everybody is included and tolerated, and you could do what you want and the government doesn't get involved, and you just stay out of everybody's business. This ideology has been the predominant ideology among the right. And this is politicians, this is conservative commentators, this is cable news hosts for a long time. In fact, for the past 30 years, if you dare to talk about religion on the right, you are often labeled a Bible thumper. You're the religious right if you talk about religion. Whereas if you just talk about policy and you make sure to say that you don't want religion to have anything to do with government, you might even repeat the line that there should be a separation between church and state, not understanding what that line actually means, then you're a regular conservative if you say that. But if you talk about religion at all and talk about how religion should impact public policy, then you are a religious right-wing individual, right? Now you know who I'm talking about. Okay. The right wing, conservatives, Republicans made a huge mistake 10 years ago. A huge mistake on gay marriage by being okay with it. They didn't fight back at all. They allowed it to happen. There were a few of us, and again, many of us who spoke out were castigated as the religious right. A few of us said, wait a second, don't allow the government to redefine a word for two reasons. First of all, gay marriage is a gateway drug, and we all knew this. We all said that gay marriage was a slippery slope, and we were mocked for saying this. We were mocked for saying it was a slippery slope, and 10 years later, 10 years, that's not that long of a time. It went from gay marriage, now we're transing kids. Children are going to drag queen story hours and being twerked on at pride parades. 10 years is all it took from gay marriage to that. Now we have gay married men, registered sex offenders who are purchasing baby boys via surrogacy. That's what kind of slippery slope we warned about. And of course, we were mocked because we were right. So first of all, gay marriage was always a gateway drug. If you normalize something that is inherently immoral, then it's going to beget more immorality. But it also gave the government the power, and there were very few people who warned about this at the time, even though this has been what has unfolded before our very eyes. When government has the power, whether it is given the power or it gives itself the power, when government is given the power to redefine a word, like they redefined marriage, marriage means the union between one man and one woman. And they said, no, we're going to redefine that. It now means the union between any two consenting adults, regardless of their sex. When government has the power to redefine a word, they can redefine any word. They didn't just give themselves the narrow power to redefine a single word. They gave themselves the broad power to redefine all words. They gave themselves the broad power to redefine any word at any time to suit any need or any ideology. And by doing so, they gave themselves complete control. That's the argument that I would make to anybody who is worried about being called religious right or is worried about moralism in our government or the separation of church and state. It's not, that's important, and we'll get you there. But for the purpose of today, when the government has the power to redefine a word that they don't have the authority to redefine, then they can redefine any word. And if they can redefine words, if they are the arbiters of truth, then they're tyrants. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when and who. When Obergefell was ruled upon, when the Supreme Court issued their ruling saying gay marriage is a thing, most Republicans were okay with it. Most people were like, okay. Doesn't really impact me, does it? I don't want to tell other people what to do. But now, 10 years later, a huge amount of people on the right understand the implications of the government redefining a word. They understand the reality that gay marriage is a gateway drug. So let me loop around to what I said at the beginning. When I say libertarianism is the problem, I don't say this with any animosity towards libertarianism or libertarians, because I also used to lean heavily libertarian, because that's what I thought. I thought the government's purpose is just to protect individual rights, really shouldn't be doing anything else. As small of a government as possible is probably the most moral form of government. Really, government should stay off of my lawn. It's not their business what I do unless I'm violating somebody else's right. That's what I believed. And so when I criticize libertarianism now, it's without animosity, because I was part of the problem at one point. But since then, I have come to realize that libertarianism is based on a fatal fallacy. And the fatal fallacy is the idea of neutrality, that we can have a neutral playing field and that every viewpoint and every way of life can be tolerated in this like multicultural society. That's not what happens. That's not reality. It might sound pretty theoretically, but the reality is there will be a prevailing set of values in a nation if you have a cohesive nation. And so it's a binary choice. This prevailing set of values is either going to be our values or it's going to be their values. The prevailing set of values is either going to be, no, boys can't be girls, and no, we shouldn't trans children, or it's going to be, you can be whatever you want. And if you're a boy and you want to be a girl, let's just chop off your wee-wee. It is a binary choice. So the fatal fallacy of libertarianism is thinking that we should create a neutral playing field. Libertarianism might be able to look at something and say that it's wrong, although really, do we know very many libertarians that do that? Theoretically, libertarians' fatal fallacy, or its fatal flaw, is that they are okay identifying something that's wrong, but they don't want government to define anything that's right. And if you don't define something that's right, if you don't stand up for that thing that is right, not because you think it's right, but because it is right, if you don't stand up for objective truth and for natural law, then you're going to lose. And when you lose, it's not just a political battle that you're going to lose. You're going to lose the culture. You're going to lose your country. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your children. And you're going to plunge your country into the chaos that we exist right now. Yeah, someone in the live chat right now, Storyscape Design, says political law is only just if the root ethic of the law reflects God's fundamental ethics for society. God's law is the basis of all justice. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I could not have said that. I could not have said that better myself. And it doesn't necessarily, I hate to say this because I want you all to do what I do. Like, I wish everyone went to mass every weekend, but it doesn't mean that you have to be a practicing Christian yourself, but you do have to acknowledge that our country was based on the Christian worldview. It was based on the reality that there's objective truth, that God wrote natural law, and you can't contradict natural law. You can pretend it doesn't exist, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And so why is gay marriage then a litmus test for politicians and for commentators? Well, it's a litmus test in two ways. It's a litmus test because do you have the courage to talk about something that's gonna get you a lot of backlash? You are going to receive a lot of backlash if you come out strongly in opposition of gay marriage. You're gonna get a lot of backlash from people on the other side. Obviously, maybe you're used to that, but you're also going to get a lot of pushback from people on your own side. They're going to tell you, "Oh, that's political suicide to talk about that. That's a way to waste political capital. That wouldn't be a politically strategic move, now would it? Because you'll alienate a lot of voters." That's what you're going to be told, and you're going to worry. Well, am I? Is this gonna take away something from, well, hypothetically, the Trump administration that otherwise they could have used to enact some kind of victory in some other policy area? So it's a litmus test about your courage, but it's also a litmus test because we have to understand that we are not negotiating. It's not just left versus right bickering that's happening in our country. We are up against political opposition that don't just have dumb policy initiatives. They're not just stupid. They're not just naive. They've been corrupted by evil. It's not left versus right in our country. It's good versus evil. That's the battle that we are engaged in, whether or not we acknowledge it. And the political opposition specifically are committed to evil ideologies like communism and Marxism. And if we don't understand that we're fighting against communists who are trying to assault the nuclear family, they're trying to assault the elements of the nuclear family, marriage and man and woman and sex and children. If we don't understand this, then we're not going to calibrate our response effectively, and we're not going to defeat them. And so gay marriage and your stance on gay marriage is a litmus test of whether you have the courage to talk about unpopular issues and try to persuade people. It's okay if you don't agree. If you're watching, there's going to be a lot of people today that don't agree with what I'm saying, but you're probably listening. And we're talking about this, and I'm attempting to persuade you that my position is the correct position, and maybe I have. Maybe you don't know yet that you've been persuaded, but maybe you're on your way to being persuaded. But it's also a litmus test for thought leaders. Do we want to be following leaders who don't understand the political opposition that we face and are going to lead us into what right-wing leaders have led us into, which is this cultural chaos? Because they might be the party of no, but they don't know how to be the party of right. Gay marriage was always a gateway drug. It was always a gateway drug. And we were right about that. Speaking of gateway drugs, marijuana went viral on X over the weekend because the Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump administration is looking to recategorize marijuana to make it a lesser dangerous drug. And it is my considered opinion that marijuana is a more polarizing topic than almost any political topic on X. Anytime the topic of marijuana comes up, people feel really strongly and have very visceral reactions to this. And there's a reason why. We're going to talk about that. Even if you think that you hate my take on this, just wait. Just wait until you hear what I have to say. But first, I want to thank a sponsor for today's episode, All Family Pharmacy. Are you tired of doctors telling you no? You can't get prescriptions for affordable off-patent medications. Your insurance won't cover what works. Well, if this is you, you are not alone. Millions of people are frustrated with the broken system. I have good news for you, though. All Family Pharmacy is here for you. All Family Pharmacy is a patient-first, independent pharmacy. They connect you with licensed U.S. doctors who approve your prescriptions online, fast and legally. No gatekeeping, no insurance middleman, no red tape. They offer affordable, high-demand medications that are often hard to access. I'm talking ivermectin, starting at just $2, medbendazole, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, NAD, the anti-aging injectable that's taking the country by storm if you're into biohacking, and more. You can order online in just minutes. A licensed doctor reviews and approves your prescription. Medications shipped straight to your door. No clinic visits, no hassle. Everything is secure, HIPAA compliant, and pharmacist reviewed. You choose the medication, not an insurance company or a frightened physician. Real healthcare freedom. You decide what's right for your body. Transparent pricing, no surprise bills. Trusted by thousands of Americans who are taking control of their own health. It's time to put your medical freedom back in your hands. Visit allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. And because you are part of this movement, use code Liz10 at checkout for your exclusive discount. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz, code Liz10. Okay. So I'm going to read you something. And I want you to wait until I'm finished reading it so that until I tell you why I'm reading this to you. Because I have gotten what's called ratioed on X. Do you know what ratioed is? It means more people have responded to you in comment form than have retweeted or liked you. And it is, if you are ratioed on X, it generally means that you have had a bad take. It generally means that people are so angry, they're telling you to go shut up. This is what I posted that got me ratioed. And the context of this, of course, is that President Trump is looking, or at least a report from the Wall Street Journal. I have no idea if the Trump administration is actually doing this or not. I don't trust the Wall Street Journal reporting on Trump, I'll tell you that. But the Wall Street Journal reported that President Trump was looking to recategorize marijuana as a less dangerous drug. And I don't think that's a good idea. And so if it's true, which I doubt because it came from the Wall Street Journal, but for the sake of argument, this is what I posted. I said, marijuana is a dangerous drug that leads to psychosis, schizophrenia, and ultimately violence. We should obviously ban it. And then I posted with that comment, I posted the studies that substantiate what I said, because I didn't just say that. That's not just my opinion. This is my opinion informed by science. I said, according to NAM, that's the National Association of Medicine, quote, the association between cannabis use and development of psychotic disorder is supported. The magnitude of this association is moderate to large and appears to be dose dependent. That's pretty significant. Schizophrenia, significantly, studies show marijuana may cause up to 30% of schizophrenia cases in young men. specifically teenagers who use cannabis by age 15 are more than 4 times as likely to suffer from schizophrenia compared to their peers who do not use cannabis. This, of course, leads to violence. The Journal of American Psychiatry found a, quote, moderate association between cannabis use and physical violence, which remained significant regardless of study design and adjustment for confounding factors like socioeconomic factors and other substance abuse. Cannabis use in this population is a risk factor for violence. Even more chillingly, in a study of convicted murderers, 1/3 had used marijuana 24 hours before committing homicide. In another study, regular use of marijuana during adolescence was the most predictive indicator of intimate partner violence. And I posted, remember, smoking marijuana in 2025 is not the same thing as smoking it in the 1970s. The amount of THC, the psychoactive component of cannabis, is 5 to 10 times higher in concentration now compared to just 20 years ago. Marijuana use clearly is dangerous for society. Since marijuana was legalized in Colorado, the crime rates skyrocketed there by 21%. Traffic fatalities have increased by 57%, and suicides have increased by 23%. Marijuana also rots your body, not just your mind. Daily marijuana users have a 25% higher chance of a heart attack and a 42% higher chance of a stroke. If you smoke pot, you're 3 times as likely to develop peripheral artery disease, which can also lead to heart attack, stroke, and death. Marijuana is making America sicker, more demented, more dangerous, and more disgusting. Why is this even a question? Ban it. Okay, so here's where I'll say I did not post this intentionally to be rage bait. I did not post this because I know that marijuana is a hot button topic, and I know that when I speak this opinion, people have a visceral reaction to this. I did not post this to try to trigger anybody or to antagonize anybody. I actually know that many of you disagree. That's why I talk about this sometime. And the reason that I posted this, knowing that many of you disagree, is because I'm trying to persuade you. I'm trying to persuade you to change your mind. I'm not just being contrarian to be contrarian, is what I'm saying. I'm trying to give you information that helped me change my mind, because I think this information, once you accept the information, meaning if you actually read it, I think it will change your mind, because I don't know how it couldn't. So I just wanted to be very clear that I wasn't posting this to try to anger you. And I read a lot of your comments. I know I got ratioed in this. I know a lot of you disagree, and I know a lot of you who agree with much of what I say still disagree with my take on marijuana. And I just want to be upfront and say, I know you disagree, and I'm trying to persuade you of my opinion. And I will tell you, so I'm going to respond to a couple of the things that you guys posted under this. Some of you posted, actually, many of you posted examples. You know, somebody said, my son has schizophrenia already, and the only reason that he's not having psychotic episodes is because he smokes marijuana every day, and that helps him feel calm. Well, my response to that is anecdotes aren't data. That's not a study. That might be your individual experience, although I would probably question what the correlation and causation, the chicken and the egg in that particular scenario. But I will also say, for every story or every anecdote where marijuana helps you chill, marijuana helps decrease your anxiety, there's also there's also a story offered about, oh yeah, my son did marijuana and he lost his mind. Yeah, we had a neighbor whose child, got into smoking pot and he became an absolute stoner and a loser and lived in his parents' basement. So anecdotes aren't data. For every chill story, there's a he lost his mind story. I'm not being dismissive of your story. I'm just saying the plural of anecdote is not data. There's also a lot of you who are accusing me of being paid by Big Pharma. And I confess to you, I even asked my producer, Spencer, before we went on air, I don't understand that accusation. Why would my opinion on marijuana have anything to do with Big Pharma? First of all, do you not know me at all? Have I not been the loudest voice? Of course, I'm not being paid by Big Pharma. By the way, that should go without saying. That's obvious. Duh. I would never take money from Big Pharma. I think Big Pharma is evil. So of course that's false, but I actually don't even understand the root of this. There was a whole bunch of you that said, oh, you're being paid by Big Pharma. Why would Big Pharma care about my opinion on marijuana? And I was kind of exploring this in my mind because I don't understand the correlation here. And perhaps it's because some people think that marijuana helps with pain, and Big Pharma That doesn't even make sense. I literally have no idea what that means. So you guys can explain that to me, but the accusation itself is stupid because I challenge you to think of anybody who's been a louder voice against Big Pharma. Pfizer, for goodness sake, has me blocked on X. If you could bring that up on the screen, Spence, that would be, I think this one always cracks me up. During the mRNA COVID vax rollouts, you can call it criticizing Big Pharma. I was just spitting facts, and Pfizer didn't like it, and they blocked me. I don't think that there's been a louder voice in the conservative movement. I know it's a little bit more popular now for conservative commentators to criticize vaccines, and I'm glad. I'm not I'm not unhappy about that. But let's just say it took a lot of people a lot longer to get on board with this. I've been talking about this for a long time, a lot longer even than COVID. So I don't understand that. If you want to explain that, I'm happy to respond to that one. But that one makes no sense to me. And of course, I'm not paid by Big Pharma. And then some of you said, well, what about alcohol? Prohibition didn't work. And my response to that is a couple of things. First of all, the argument that prohibition didn't work is stupid because I think prohibition actually lowered the alcohol intake of the American people by like 40%. We now have more daily marijuana users than daily alcohol drinkers. So I actually don't understand why people immediately engage in whataboutism when it comes to marijuana. Like, we're talking about marijuana. Let's talk about marijuana. If you want to talk about alcohol separately, that's fine. But why can't you just contend with the arguments about marijuana? And this is the question that I would ask you about marijuana. And I suppose you can also apply this to alcohol if you want. But first, at least apply it to marijuana. My question to you is, we have this controlled experiment in our country when it comes to marijuana. And that controlled experiment is, first we had a situation where marijuana was illegal. Then we had a situation where marijuana was partially legal, medicinal marijuana, and it was abused, but not to the extent that it is now, that it's been socially destigmatized, it's been normalized, and it's been legalized. And so my question to you is, has society gotten better or worse since marijuana use has not only been normalized, but legalized? Has society gotten better or has society gotten worse? Now, the obvious answer to this is that society has gotten much worse. We are sicker. We're more demented. Our cities are more dangerous. And the smell of marijuana constantly in public areas is disgusting. Society has obviously gotten worse. And no, it has not contributed to any kind of economic gain. Anything that the marijuana industry has brought in has been counteracted by the fact that people that are daily users of marijuana are not contributing members of society. And this is the point of what of bringing this up right now. Again, it was not intended to be rage bait. I'm intending to try to persuade you by saying, hey, listen, when I post this, I'm not just trying to trigger you. I'm basing this on scientific studies. But here's the thing. Just like I said that gay marriage is a litmus test for conservatives, it shows you whether they have the courage to go against the grain, even their own party, to take a position that's kind of socially uncomfortable sometimes. It also shows you whether conservatives, politicians, and commentators understand the political enemy that we face. There are some issues that 5 years from now, the entire base is going to be on board with, even if they're not on board with now. And gay marriage is actually a pretty good example of watching this in action, because 10 years ago, when gay marriage was legalized by the Supreme Court, most Republicans were totally fine with it. But now, Republicans have seen the implications of that ruling. And so their minds are changing. And 5 years from now, their minds are going to be changed even more. Marijuana is also an issue like that. Over the course of the past couple of years, there have been 3 people on X who have been speaking reality about marijuana. And that would be me, Alex Berenson, and Sagar Enjeti. 3 people have said, no, marijuana is dangerous. It leads to psychosis and schizophrenia and violence and homicide. It should be banned. 3 people. Well, now, this iteration on X, look at how many people on X now are saying it's disgusting. We have a whole bunch of new conservative commentators who have been persuaded. Not only persuaded personally, but enough to speak out against it publicly. Because we have come to understand, and this is a good thing, by the way. I'm not even sitting here shaming these people for not having that position previously. It's because we've had our eyes opened to the fact that libertarianism doesn't work. That it's a detriment to society. Okay, there are people in the live chat saying they're smoking weed right now. I don't believe you. I do not believe you. Funny. I contend with any of my arguments here. Contend with my arguments. Has marijuana, the legalization and the normalization of marijuana, has it improved society or has society gotten worse as a result of this? We're living in this controlled experiment because it was illegal, then it was partially legal, but normalized, and now it's legal. Has society gotten better or worse? The reason conservatives are changing their mind on this, and the reason this is going to be one of those issues, you can put a bookmark on this episode and revisit it in 5 years. The conservative movement's going to feel totally different about this. Just like, I'll give you another example. 10 years ago, when we were all watching Charles Krauthammer on Fox News. He was such a good writer. I loved watching that guy. And he was talking about illegal immigration and our border security. And he was saying, you know what? The appetite of the American people for amnesty, for the, whatever they were saying at the time, the 10 million illegals who are here, the appetite for amnesty will be there if we just stop the flow. If we secure our border, then the American people will be generous and welcoming enough that they'll have the appetite to extend amnesty to the illegals who are here. And this was like the prevailing Republican viewpoint on it. Just secure the border, and then we're going to happily integrate these 10 million illegals into our society. And then reality smacked us in the face. That these illegals don't want to integrate into our society. They don't even like America. They come here and they march in our streets in support of Hamas. They don't learn English. They don't assimilate. They commit crimes and they go on welfare. And so now, 10 years later, how many Republicans do you know that support amnesty? I mean, Republicans outside of Congress, do you know that support amnesty? Because people's eyes were opened. It's happening right now with gay marriage. And mark my words, it will happen with marijuana. Because marijuana, just like we warned, it's quite literally a gateway drug. But it is a perfect textbook example of the fatal flaw of libertarianism. Remember, freedom is not the end goal of a society, as libertarianism tells you. Freedom is not the ultimate goal. Freedom is the means to something else. And that something else is something greater. Something greater like virtue. How does marijuana increase our pursuit of something greater? It does not. It does not. I didn't post it as rage bait. I did not. I'm looking at the comments now. I'm looking at your comments. PTSD needs strong medicine. Look up the studies. Medical marijuana is a farce. Studies show this. This was the marijuana lobby constructing. Read Alex Berenson's book. I cannot recommend highly enough that you read Alex Berenson's book. Read his book. It's called Tell Your Children. He talks about how the marijuana lobby structured a public opinion campaign on how to destigmatize marijuana and normalize it. And the first thing that they did is they had to get this stamp of approval of the experts. So what did they do? What did they do to do this? They conducted studies, scientific studies, and they said, oh, medical marijuana, that medical marijuana is helpful. And they paid off researchers and they rigged studies and they got experts to endorse marijuana. So now if you say you're against marijuana, well, you're against the experts. This is a medical treatment. And that was the first step. And once they did that, then they moved toward legalizing it just for recreational purposes. At the same time, did you watch Steve Robinson from the Maine Wires? Did you watch his weed triad documentary about the Chinese international crime cartels that are running illegal marijuana farms in the United States and what they're doing to it, what it is? Watch that. Read Alex Berenson's book and tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me that I'm wrong. I'm reading your comments. I'm reading your comments. Oh, back to the PTSD. That's where I started here. The PTSD studies are wrong. Tell me how marijuana would help PTSD if it increases your chances of psychosis, schizophrenia, violence, and homicide. It doesn't make you chill. Sometimes it can give you a temporary feeling of chill, and then it makes you munchy and agitated and paranoid. And that's just narrowly in what it does to you right then. That's not even the impact that it has long-term on your brain. Okay, Grace says in the live chat, this is new to me, but I'm listening. Mike said, so you smoked before? No, I've never smoked marijuana. I don't do drugs. I've never smoked marijuana. And I'm glad because of what the study show does to you. Tristan says, oh, yes, we need a random blonde who thinks she knows more than she doesn't, telling soldiers what they do and don't need for PTSD. This is the kind of reaction that I said I didn't post that as rage bait. I didn't post that to trigger you. There is a visceral reaction that people have to this. And I see that. I hear you. I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I'm trying to bring to your attention information that I think might change your mind. Read the information. Look at those studies. I cited those studies. Tell me where those studies are wrong. I understand that not every single person that smokes a joint is going to immediately have a psychotic break, become schizophrenic, and go on a murder spree. I get that, of course. But what is your response to the studies that show that marijuana leads to psychosis and schizophrenia and violence? I never hear any of these people. Like I said, I'm listening to you. You listen to me in response. That's how a respectful conversation goes. I'm presenting information and studies. You're presenting, I don't know if it's an insult to call me a random blonde. Yeah, I have blonde hair. Maybe you don't know me. Whatever. Do you have any response to the studies, or you just disagree? The thesis of the show is we pursue truth, and that sometimes means talking about uncomfortable topics. It's what we like to do together. Jen says, never in my life have I ever seen someone come down with any of your so-called studies. Look it up. Even, like I said, even if you disagree with me, first of all, think about it. You don't have to change your mind right this second, although some of you are, and I appreciate that. Read the studies. It might change your mind. I know people disagree with me on this, but I'm right. And this is going to be one of those, the point of all of this, circling back to the beginning, the point of all of this is there are issues that it's unpopular. You might get a lot of contrarian response. I'm reading your live chat response to it. And 5 years from now, all y'all are going to agree with me on this. You're going to be like, oh yeah, Liz was right. Liz was right. And I just didn't see it. And that's okay. But try to get there faster than 5 years. Try to get there in like, I don't know, an hour. Try to get there in an hour. Crazy Scott says, oh, that's an apropos username, Scott, for this opinion. He says, you cannot say anything about the effects if you've never used it. Can you say anything about the effects of, Hunter Biden smoking crack if you haven't smoked crack yourself? That sounds like the opinion of, someone that might be smoking a little bit too much weed. Of course, you can talk about the effects of it even if you haven't done it. Am I not allowed to have an opinion on meth either because I can't, because I haven't used meth? Can I say cyanide is bad to ingest because I haven't ingested it? Of course I can. Of course I can. Okay. There's an article that I wrote a couple years ago on the Washington Examiner in which I linked all of these studies that I referenced today, and I'll post that on my social media so you guys can click on it. Crazy Scott goes, I don't smoke it. I ingest it. I knew it. I knew it. And let me tell you, Scott, and I say this out of love, it's impacting your mind. And the evidence of that was your argument. Okay, that's all the time I have for today. Same time, same place tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll go live right here. Thank you for sitting here and talking about these uncomfortable topics, gay marriage and marijuana all in one day. What are we talking about? It's fun. Make sure you're subscribed to the show. YouTube.com/Liz Wheeler, X.com/Liz_Wheeler. Spotify is the Liz Wheeler Show. Go subscribe. Give us a 5-star review. Thank you for being here. This is the Liz Wheeler Show, and I'm your host, Liz Wheeler.